Tansei, I'm Krisanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News Daytime on this Tuesday. The former Liberal Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould, has announced publicly that she has breast cancer. She made the announcement on Monday afternoon on a social media post. Wilson-Raybould said following a recent surgery, she will be starting her treatment for breast cancer shortly. She is calling for other women to monitor their health and well-being and seek regular mammograms and make sure to get tested for other cancers and illnesses. Wilson-Raybould says she will honor her grandparents and parents who continued to work while facing their own illness by working on her new book, which will be about leadership. Wilson-Raybould served in the Liberal government from 2015 to 2019 following her resignation from cabinet. In a statement, Jody Wilson-Raybould added, "While this is scary and unsettling, I take strength from the many of you who have shared your stories of resilience and healing with me over the years. I am also so grateful to my surgeons and BC Cancer Agency for their wonderful care and all the love and support around me from my family and friends." A news release issued by Manitoba Hydro this week says shotgun pellet damage was found on the power line leading into the Pimicikamak Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. The Manitoba Kiwetanawi Okimikanak, or MKO, says they are appalled by Manitoba Hydro's misleading theory and say it's a blatant attempt to distract from the Crown Corporation's own failures. Pimicikamak Chief David Monias went on Facebook Live last night to respond to Hydro's release. APTN's Julia Ross brings us the latest.
Their media release says shotgun pellet damage to the aerial markers and the power line itself was found on December 28th. The release also says they can't say for sure if the pellets caused the line break and power outage, resulting in Pimicikamak Cree Nation's evacuation. Chief David Monias took to Facebook Monday night to respond. He says that when speaking with Hydro, he was told that the markers were found close by, but Chief Monias says when looking at the poles, there are no markers.
If you look at the lines where it broke, right? If you really look at the lines where it broke, it's close by the poles that are there, and there's no markers. There's no markers there. There's no orange, white markers. What they did say, when I did phone Hydro, they said they found that marker close by and it had bullet holes or something like that. But that who's to say that it didn't fall down before and then it was on the ground and somebody shot at it?
Hydro says the definitive cause of the break is still under investigation.
If you know your guns, it's not going to penetrate that wire. You know, that picture that somebody showed me is a ball. It has scattered pellets on there, but it looked like it was close range, right? And if you were to shoot at the top of a pole from the river, pellets scatter like this, by the way, and it would only have 1, 2, 3, maybe 5.
Manitoba Hydro says they plan to replace the river crossing spans of the power line that show firearm damage. Chief Monias says the power line that was damaged was deep into the bush near the river, and that the transmission lines should have been replaced already because they are old and outdated.
You know, all I'm saying is that if this line was on the highway of Highway 374, we would have been able to get to that broken line real fast. It would have been in a matter of 3 to 5 hours maybe for them to fix it. Not days, not 6 days. It would have been hours.
Chief Monias says Pimicikamak continues to call for a permanent solution and that Manitoba Hydro acknowledged the urgent need to replace transmission lines over water crossings by March. He says that the need to replace entire sections of the transmission lines proves how vulnerable the outdated infrastructure is. Julia Ross, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We are learning more about the RCMP shooting death of Bronson Paul in the Tobic First Nation in New Brunswick that happened over the weekend. Here's an update. According to the Serious Incident Response Team, or CERT, Bronson Paul was involved in a domestic disturbance in a home in Tobique, also known as Negotkuk, on Sunday evening. Perth Andover RCMP arrived shortly after 5 p.m. and say they found Paul inside with an edged weapon and he advanced towards them. CERT says RCMP tasered Paul, but it was ineffective. Another officer then fired their service weapon, striking Paul. First aid was applied and Paul was taken to hospital, where he was later pronounced deceased. Bronson Paul is the second First Nation person shot and killed by RCMP in eastern Canada in less than a week. Tobique Chief Ross Purley says leadership has closed the local RCMP detachment for safety reasons. Chief Purley says mental health services are available for community members in Tobique, and a sacred fire has been lit at a community hall. Chief Purley wants full transparency in CERT's investigation, and he wants more Indigenous representation within CERT. In a statement, New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt called for kindness, compassion, and understanding, adding, "We are deeply saddened by the death of Bronson Paul. Our thoughts are with his children, his family, and the entire Negotkuk community as they navigate this difficult and painful time. We have offered Chief Purley and Council our support and are committed to ensuring that the investigation proceeds in a fair, transparent, and urgent way so the family and community can have the answers and long-term solutions they need." Tobique First Nation is located about 180 kilometers northwest of Fredericton. Nunavummiut are standing with Greenlanders as United States President Donald Trump continues to make threats that he will annex Greenland. As APTN's Justin Hardy tells us, a protest was held this weekend in Iqaluit to show solidarity with Qalalit, or Inuit of Greenland.
Qalalit Nunat, Qalalit Pigat means Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. This cry comes in response to ever-increasing threats from U.S. President Trump to annex the territory, according to Iqaluit organizer Ayu Peter.
We are showing support for Greenland and Greenlanders since Donald Trump is threatening to take over Greenland or to buy it, and that's totally not acceptable.
Dozens of Nunavummiut braved the cold Saturday morning to stand in solidarity with protests happening in Greenland and Denmark, as well as other Arctic communities. Nunavut and Greenland have long-standing relationships, both culturally and through government partnerships. Last week, Premier John Mayne spoke on the importance of Nunavut standing with Greenland. He says that there haven't been any official talks yet between governments, but Nunavut will do anything in its power to support them.
That's our intention going forward, is to have those conversations with them when a time permits or presents itself, and then to listen to what they have to say in terms of how we can offer support and respect their views and their desire for self-determination.
While many are concerned that President Trump will turn his sights on the Canadian Arctic should he take Greenland, Peter says that she's not too worried about that.
It's just a person who is very unpredictable. He goes from one to the other, he threatens everybody, and we don't really know where he's standing.
She adds that there were better ways for the U.S. to try to get what they're after.
In Greenland, we are trying to ask him what is it that he wants. If he could just say what he wants, then maybe we can work together with him for security or for minerals. But he cannot do it by force. He shouldn't be allowed to do it by force.
Justin Hardy, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
And we have a team en route to Greenland. Stay tuned later this week for those stories and updates on APTN National News and on aptnnews.ca. We now want to tell you about this week's new web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, are you concerned about Trump's stance on Greenland? You can answer very concerned, somewhat concerned, not concerned at all, or unsure. Go to our website at aptnnews.ca to have your say. The question will be on the right-hand side of the homepage. The First Nation of Nacho-Nayakdan in north-central Yukon has signed what it calls a historic agreement with mining company Snowline Gold Corp. The MOU between both parties was signed on Saturday, Snowline is conducting advanced exploration work at its Rogue project, which sits within the First Nations traditional territory. It requires the First Nations free, prior, and informed consent before the construction of a mining project can go ahead. It also ensures the First Nations decision-making authority is respected before a new mine is built. The agreement is the first of its kind signed under the First Nations mining policy, which details how it expects to work with operators.
Well, this is the first of its kind in the Yukon. It is a legally binding agreement that Snowline will not do anything in regards to building a mine or anything without the consent of the First Nation of Glengarry.
Yeah, it's important for us as a company too, and for myself as a Yukoner to see things done the right way. We have a complicated and storied history of mining in recent decades here, and but there is that potential here. There's no reason, geologically speaking, that we can't do it the right way, that we can't have success stories here.
We have more news after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. A recently released report says there are major barriers for two-spirit, transgender, and gender non-conforming people in the Northwest Territories needing to access gender-affirming healthcare. As our APTN reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs tells us, community advocates and the people who wrote the report are hoping it creates change.
When it comes to gender-affirming healthcare in the Northwest Territories, urgent improvements are needed. That's according to a recently released public report by the Northern Mosaic Network in partnership with researchers from the University of Manitoba. It examines existing territorial guidelines for transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming healthcare and concludes that while policies exist, they aren't working as intended. Co-author of the report, Emily Smith, says the findings and recommendations come from patients and providers.
Coverage for gender-affirming care is not comprehensive. There are some things that are covered and medical travel will be covered, but there are a lot of things that aren't, especially when it comes to any kind of feminizing procedures. So there's really an inequality there in terms of what people have access to, and it's very expensive to pay out of pocket.
Some barriers identified include confusing, inaccessible, and incomplete guidelines, limited informed and compassionate providers, and impacts of various forms of oppression. Some patient and caregiver recommendations include updating guidelines for improved readability, accessibility, and scope, including mental health care as part of gender-affirming healthcare, implementing mandatory and ongoing tailored training for healthcare workers, and updating electronic medical records beyond M and F gender options. The report also recommends bringing in locum specialists or having a dedicated gender clinic to reduce the need for out-of-territory medical travel.
And that's really important because from the administrative part of walking into the room and interacting with somebody at the desk, all of those steps impact somebody's experience as a patient. And unfortunately, as the report shows, people have bad experiences, have experienced discrimination and things that create barriers for them to access care.
The report echoes the deep concerns Northerners have vocalized about the rise of anti-transgender hate in Alberta, the threat to gender-affirming care, and the NWT's reliance on that province for NWT patient needs.
We weren't able to talk to youth because obviously working with youth as a part of research has a different level of ethics procedures, and especially for our first project, that just wasn't something that we could do. But I think it's really important to talk to youth because they are being uniquely impacted, especially with what's happening in Alberta. So part of that is making sure that the GNWT is also talking to people, talking to patients. This is a starting point, but this is not the be-all and end-all of hearing directly from people.
The full report can be found on the Northern Mosaic Network's website. Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
APTN's Face to Face is back with an all-new episode tonight. Dennis Ward's guest this time is Ross Memphis Pambrun. The Métis entrepreneur, musician, and sought-after speaker is also the host of APTN's hit show Red River Gold. The show was recently nominated for a number of awards and has 2 more seasons on the way. Here's a preview.
We're not just telling a fun story that somebody may have made up. No, This gold was being shipped to put down Louis Riel and the Red River Resistance. It's to pay the soldiers, to stop the resistance. That gold went missing. So it's not only is it a fun story that's a challenge to tell, but we meet so many people in the community. I still get to play my instrument on there. I get to sing every now and then. I'm sitting around the campfire. We're faced with the challenges of, are we going to sink in the Caribou Bog? Are we going to get across that river? That's the challenge, and that's what makes the show exciting.
The founder of Mitso is up next to tell us how his dream began with only a food truck. We'll be right back. Willallen for staying with us. St. John's 1, Charlottetown -5. Happy Valley Goose Bay -9, La Grande River -29. -15 in Quebec City, Saguenay -19. Ottawa -17, Toronto -13. -23 in Sudbury, Sioux Lookout -26. Churchill -28, Norway House -24. -20 in Winnipeg, Dauphin -17. Yorkton -19, Swift Current Flurries in -10. Clear skies in Stony Rapids at -20, Buffalo Narrows -14. Grand Prairie -8, Fort McMurray -16. Lethbridge -3, Medicine Hat -7. 6 in Tofino, Penticton -1. Fort Nelson -9, Smithers partly cloudy and -6. Old Crow -21, Whitehorse -10. -19 in Wati, Fort Simpson -13. Paulatuk -20, Tuktoyaktuk -15. Baker Lake -26, Arviat -24. And Iqaluit -18, Arctic Bay -33. Since 2018, Indigenous entrepreneur Ian Gladue from the Wabaska First Nation in northern Alberta has been creating traditional Indigenous dry meat and pemmican through his company called Mitso, which is the Cree word for eat. The food product has been making people rethink their usual choice of beef jerky in convenience and grocery stores across the prairies.
No fake sweeteners, no soy, just real protein that's gonna fuel you. Clean and your protein.
The idea for Mitso started with a food truck in Alberta. Then it evolved into his love for dry meat, and now Ian Gladue says Mitso has grown into something so much more since he first started. Last November, Mitso announced that it has signed a multi-million-dollar investment with Raven Indigenous Capital Partners. The investment will expand the company's manufacturing capacity at its Edmonton production facility, move towards a larger cross-country distribution system, and create more products across its line of meat snacks. Officials say the investment will amplify Indigenous leadership in the food industry. Gladue says the results are in the product, with a focus on delivering authentic traditional food experiences that use natural and local ingredients, which promotes nutritional wellness. We recently spoke with Ian Gladue from Edmonton. Here's that interview. Ian Gladue, thanks so much for chatting with us. Can you talk about your humble beginnings when Mitso was just a dream and you only had your food truck? Why did you want to start Mitso?
Yeah, I think for me, it was really important the more I learned about my identity of who I was. I realized that when we started the food truck, although bannock is a traditional staple now in our culture, there was a timeline to when sugars, salts, flour, all of those came into play. A time of when our people were becoming colonized. And I wanted to really have something more in depth and something more true to Turtle Island.
You're now selling pemmican and dry meat by the truckloads across the prairies. Can you explain the day when you realized that this business venture was going to be much bigger than it already was? I'm thinking about that announcement you made just last November.
Yeah, so I think for me, it probably it clicked in for me as soon as we signed those papers, and it's amazing to think where you were at. You started off on a little food truck and out selling Bannock burgers to the first federal facility of its kind, Indigenous owned, to sell traditional meat snacks like this, and to sign those papers, to know that people believe in the mission, believe in the purpose, what we're doing. I think that's when everything really dialed in for me, as when we signed those documents and all of the paperwork. So, yeah.
That's awesome, Ian. We're so happy for you. With any big business, there is always challenges to face and overcome. Ian, what were some of those challenges for you with Mitso?
I'd say the biggest challenge for me is, how do you educate people who don't want to be educated? That is probably the biggest struggle. Our foods date back thousands of years. Our people, no questions asked, we know what the product is. We know dry meat, we know pemmican, but modern world society, how can they understand and connect to the story, I think, is probably one of the biggest struggles for us.
I've seen a lot of your educational videos on social media, so you're definitely getting through to a lot of your customers there. You talk about this a lot in your videos on social media, but for our audiences, why do you want to make pemmican, Ian?
Well, the true reason why I actually started was so my mom didn't have to work again. That was the whole purpose. And as I learned about who I was, as this venture pushed me more to be a better version of myself, to understand the culture more, I didn't realize the impact it was going to make on our people. Thousands and thousands of people come around, they come to us talking about how we've inspired them to want something more. And as that evolved now, I use my voice and my platform now to bring that respectful space back to life here now. So I feel that's probably a big part of it here, of where I feel why and so on like this.
Finally, Ian, what is your message to other Indigenous entrepreneurs out there who have an idea but have never turned it into a reality yet?
Yes. Your past doesn't define you. I grew up on the streets. I grew up homeless. I grew up struggle, alcohol, drugs. I grew up a very hard life. But once you learn your identity, our identity is our power. That's where our power is. If you learn who you are, you can do anything. The culture will ground you. The culture, our way of life, will bring you back to who you are supposed to be. So your past doesn't define you.
Such a great and powerful answer there, Ian. Ian Gladue is the founder, president, and chief rainmaker of Mitso Pemmican Strips and Dry Meat. Ian, thanks so much for being here today, and I'll make sure to pick up some Mitso pemmican next time I'm on the highway.
Let's go! Right on, man. Thank you so much.
From all of us at APTN National News Daytime, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again. Exe.